I'm Carole Koscienly, co-chair of Legal and Voters, and Jane Cecil's my other co-chair back there. Welcome. Glad that you came today. Legal and Voters has been very busy doing candidates nights and things, and of course this is our last, just for our group, for issues. And most of you know, in 2020, the league will be 100 years old. And so we've been around a long time. I've been in for 50 of it. Because I think it's probably the most important thing I do, is getting people to vote. So I want to urge everybody to make sure you're registered and to realize that you may want to verify your registration, even if you think you are, because as you know, some of the rules have changed. Sometimes people move, forget to change their address. Sometimes people haven't voted for a long time, and they've been purging some people who haven't voted for a long time. So it's always good to go and verify your vote. So we're really happy that you're here. And remember, this is about issues, and I think issues are just as important, of course, as our candidates. So we're really happy that you made the effort on this busy Saturday afternoon. I want to introduce Marcia Goldberg. She's past president of the Greater Cleveland League, and she's going to be our moderator, and she is going to introduce the candidates. Oh, before I go, I just want to mention, on the back table as you leave, there is 3 events coming up. This is the last of our local event, but there's 3 important ones coming up that are co-sponsored by people like Common Cause and Plain Dealers sponsored one of them. There's Tuesday, November 13. The election's over. What did the voters say? That sounds like a really good one. And November 15th, chronic pain in the post-opiate era. And then December 4th, plastics in Lake Erie. We hear a lot about plastics. 3 really good programs. There is a brochure or a paper like this in the back if you're interested in any of them. And thank you for coming.
The ballot language that you'll see when you go to vote next month is on the program. So you can become familiar with issues 10, 11, and 12. Those will be on everybody's ballot in the county. I'm going to just go quickly over the little history of charter review process. In 1803, the Ohio Constitution was established and established county government with what we had before, 3 elected county commissioners and other elected officials to oversee all county business. 176 years later, Summit County chose to form a charter form of government, which is legal under Ohio Constitution. It became the first county in the state, and now one of only 2, to adopt home rule and establish a district representative form. 30 years later, 2009, you know what happened here. Cuyahoga County citizens approved a home rule charter form of government. With 11 district council members, we have one here today, Councilmember Ann Baker, and 1 elected county executive who is up for election this fall. Terms of charter called for initial citizens review in 2012, which is when our first charter review commission met. And then in 2017, that would be 5 years later, we had our second charter review commission formed, and that's the one we'll be talking about today. There will not be another one for 10 years, and it'll be to every 10 years thereafter. This particular charter review commission was formed last year. 9 electors were on that commission, and it was headed by Judge Adrine, immediately on my left here. Council majority approved the proposed amendments. They could not, actually it had to be more than a majority, a supermajority had to approve them in order for them to get on the ballot. And then it was sent to the Board of Elections, which is why out of the many that this Charter Commission looked at, there's just 3 that we're going to be voting on. I want to introduce the panel to, right, as I mentioned, this is the Honorable Ronald B. Adrine, retired administrative judge of Cleveland Municipal Court, where he served for 36 years. He retired in January 2017 and was tapped 6 months later to lead this commission. You couldn't stay retired too long, right? The next is Michael W. King. His day job is as special counsel to the Cuyahoga County Council. He was one of 2 county officials named to the Charter Review Commission. He lives in Cleveland now, grew up in Cleveland Heights, went to Hawken, undergrad at the University of Rochester, law school at WashU in St. Louis, and then was law director for the county until he took his current job. Now, I attended, either Audrey, Morris, Linda Mayer, or I, and sometimes 2 or 3 of us, attended every Charter Review Commission meeting. The League itself submitted a couple of suggestions to the Charter Review Commission. One of those was the Inspector General Amendment that will be on your ballot. Another one was about changing the county to nonpartisan elections. That was not, it was considered, but they decided not to do that. And I think Judge Adrine and Michael and Ms. Baker can talk about how decisions were made. I mean, we were not in, many of you probably saw Hamilton. We were not in the room where it happened, but we were just outside the room where it happened. And we had some influence on how things happened, would you not say? And so let's have Judge Adrine and Mr. King and Ms. Baker go over the process of looking at what was submitted and then deciding what would go on the ballot. Can you just start us out, Judge Adrine?
Sure. So good afternoon, and thank you for having us out to have this conversation with you. Let's see if I can make this thing work.
I think that's on.
This little red button.
It should be on.
There you go. It's on. 2 things. See? 2 things I'd like to clarify. First of all, the end of my term was actually January the 3rd, 2018. So I'm still newly minute, and I'm a rookie at being retired. And some people would say I'm not doing real well at it because I'm doing lots of stuff. The second thing is that we had a wonderful group, and I want you all to know that they were in the room where it happened most of the time.
Thank you.
Okay, because that was the way we tried to operate. So I just want to give you an overview of the process so that you can understand, why I say that to begin with as it relates to it. We wanted to have a very transparent process when this is all over and said and done, and then when anybody's saying that, we had gone into, the smoke-filled room in the back and cut deals and, done things that were not in the people's best interest. So in June of 2017, in accordance with the county charter, Armin Budish, the county executive, selected the 2018 Charter Review Commission as he was required to do, and the members of the commission included, in addition to myself, Diane Dowling, who was the Senior Vice President, Director of Corporate Affairs with the Huntington National Bank, the Honorable Susan A. Drucker, who is the retired mayor of the city of Solon, Dennis Kennedy, who is the fiscal officer for Cuyahoga County, Mike King, who is seated here to my left, and who serves as indicated as special counsel for the Cuyahoga County Council. The Honorable Thomas P. Persiak, who is the mayor of the city of Strongsville, Ms. Claire Rocasco, who is vice president of government relations and community outreach for Cuyahoga Community College, Victor A. Ruiz, who is the executive director of Esperanza Inc., and Davidia Russell, who is state president of the CLUW and president of OAPSE and AFSCME Local 4 Ohio Northern District. I think I can speak for all the members of our commission when I say that it was our honor to perform this important civic responsibility, and I'm also pleased to report to you that ours was a hard-working, harmonious group that had high-minded objectives and that we held those firmly in mind, but kept our feet firmly planted on the ground as we moved forward to take care of the commission's business. So as our first order of business, we conducted a review of the work that had been completed by our predecessor Charter Review Commission from 2013, and after that review, we decided that we would only revisit topics that had been addressed by that commission where additional information that warranted a fresh look had come to fruition since they gave their report. Many of the issues that they studied resulted in referrals to the county council for placement on the ballot, and council chose to place some of those things on the ballot and put them before the voters. In other instances, they also chose not to do so, and there were still other matters that council deferred placing on the ballot until a later time, but had not really acted on. So as far as we were concerned, those matters were still alive and pending. They just hadn't been resolved. The current commission also decided to focus its primary attention on a number of new issues and subjected both the new and remaining issues to an intense vetting process. The commission's members and those who staff the commission established that process by developing and adhering to an effective set of operational guidelines. Those guidelines included establishment of timetables for the submission of all issues to the commission for its review and consideration. Although we didn't make that a hard and firm, if somebody came up with something that was really important or something we thought really needed to take a look at, we had some flexibility to add it to the mix. We also had a process whereby regular and specially scheduled meetings to receive input from the public and to discuss, debate the issues presented was established. We established criteria for acceptance and rejection of proposed amendments to the charter. So we wanted to have something that we were comparing all of the issues to as we move forward, and not just saying, okay, what are we going to do with this? So we had a set of criteria to start from. And there was an allowance of enough time to complete the commission's work and to prepare and present its final report with its recommendations to the county council as we were mandated to do by the deadline that had been set for us in July of 2018. So we were actually constituted in October of 2017, so that didn't give us a whole lot of time to get this done. Of the guidelines that were put forth, perhaps the most useful from the commission standpoint was the establishment of the criteria for accepting or rejecting proposed amendments to the current charter. Any number of proposals coming before the commission presented excellent arguments for reform of the county's current administrative and/or business model. However, the commission's job was to identify those proposals that made the case for adding to or modifying the charter, which serves as the county's fundamental governance document. The following criteria then provide the standard of review that successful proposals had to meet if we were going to move them forward by way of recommendation. The first was the proposal evaluated by the prior Charter Review Commission? The second was, if so, did the current proposal present new information or conditions not considered previously? The third was, did the new proposal clarify the charter in some meaningful way, either by clarifying its language or clarifying a particular purpose? The fourth one was the subject matter of the proposal best handled by amending the charter as opposed to enacting an ordinance? The fifth one was, did the proposed amendment contribute to more effective government? And lastly, are the powers or opportunities of county government appropriately increased by the proposed amendment? In the end, the commission concluded only a handful of proposals that it recommended in its final report for placement on the ballot cleared the bar that we set. Ultimately, it was the commission's considered opinion that the mere fact that a review is required under the charter does not necessarily mean in all instances that change is implicated. And so that was basically how we moved forward. In October of 2017, after we were constituted, we solicited written proposals from both the public and key county stakeholders. The following issues, topics were raised by those appearing before the commission. The amendment of the charter to specially reference and include the office of Inspector General. The institution of a nonpartisan primary and general political election process. Clarification of the roles of the Personnel Review Commission vis-a-vis those of the Department of Human Resources. The establishment of open political primary elections. The establishment of the Sheriff's Office as an elected as opposed to an appointed position in county government. Provision of a funding stream to provide trauma-informed care for children of those incarcerated by the county. Addition of language to the charter addressing campaign finance issues. Technical adjustment to the county's internal audit policies and procedures. And amendment of charter sections dealing with the executive and council succession following a vacancy in office. Let me just say before I turn it over to Michael that because of its potential, this last one was considered by us because of the fact that there was a certain amount of potential disruption that we felt could ensue if we didn't really give it a hard look. We did spend a considerable amount of time examining ways in which the process for succession for both the Office of County Executive and County Counsel could be improved, and the Commission acknowledged that the Charter's existing succession provisions are deficient in a number of ways, and we went around and around with that. There was a very extensive proposal that was brought forward by County Councilman Dale Miller, who apparently has given a lot of thought of this over a number of years, and gave it to us, but due to the breadth and the complexity of the various options that we had in front of us, as well as the practical and financial constraints of the election process, the Commission found that it was unable to come to consensus on a particular proposal. And so as a result, we did not make a recommendation. Nevertheless, we believe this is a really important issue that needs to take up some significant amount of time by County Council, and if necessary, if it's not resolved before the time that the next County Charter Review Commission is constituted, that it should be revisited at that time. One last thing, with regard to the proposal about internal audit, this seemed like a very technical issue, and a number of people raised the question as to whether or not it was appropriate to be in the county charter for us to deal with it. But it was already in the county charter from before. And so we thought, well, the people who formulated this document in the first instance thought it was important enough to be in there. We should take this up, and we did. And it was brought to the Commission kind of at the 11th hour. Nobody had thought about it, but there was this kind of, well, Michael was talking about it. There was kind of this push and pull on it that caused us to really conclude that we should take it up, and we did, and we made a recommendation. So we met 12 times over the course of the months that we were together, and in that time frame, we also had one community meeting. 20 people came in front of us to make personal statements and to present their ideas, their suggestions for enhancement of the county's charter. Some of them came on, as indicated, the folks from the League of Women Voters were there every time, but there were other people who came with regularity and had much to say and made suggestions and offered opinions on everybody else's thing in addition to their own, and we appreciated all of that. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over.
Could I just ask one quick question?
Sure.
One of the other objectives you had that you stated at least a couple meetings was that you didn't want to consider an amendment that you knew or that was generally known that would not pass county council. So why don't you just talk about that too a little bit?
You know, the folks that formulated the county charter set the bar really high for amendment. In order to get something placed on the ballot by council, you have to have 2/3 of them agree that they want to put it on the ballot. So we tried to take the pulse of the county council members to see whether certain kinds of things that we floated out there that we would like to have seen move forward had even a snowflake's chance in Hades of getting through. And we concluded, unfortunately, that there were a number of things that we thought maybe it would be a good idea to have the public weigh in on. Didn't have a chance. So we then focused all of our attention on the things that we thought that where we could really make a difference, because we thought that engaging in nugatory acts.
How did you take the county council's pulse? Was it through Mr. Miller mainly, or Councilwoman Baker, who was attending some of the meetings?
We had staff.
Okay. Of course.
And in addition to which, we had representatives from county government who sat on the commission with us. We had conversation with Councilman Miller because he came to almost all of the meetings. The county executive came. The inspector general came. Each time that one of them would come, I kind of made it my business to kind of pull them off to the side and try to get some idea from them, you know, as to what they thought. And in addition, of course, we had people who were in a position to hear the scuttlebutt.
Right, exactly. Mr. King, what I wanted, when I said we weren't really in the room where it happened, I really was referring to how the language was drafted for the actual amendments. So beyond whatever you want to talk about, could you discuss that as well?
Sure. Thank you, Judge Adrine, and thank you to the League of Women Voters. Both of you were integral to the Charter Review Commission process. I think, Judge, you kept us on task and gave us a structured way to talk about all these issues, because we had a lot on our plate. And the League of Women Voters has been active in county government since the new form of county government, and probably before, but that's before my time. And so I just want to say I really appreciate all of your help. So I'm going to talk about the actual amendments that were recommended by the Charter Review Commission to County Council, and then I'm going to hand it over to Councilman Baker to talk about the Council's process, because as was stated earlier, the Charter Review Commission can't actually place amendments on the ballot on their own. It still has to go to County Council, and it needs a supermajority. It's 8 votes out of 11 to put something on the ballot. So I think there was an interest, as the judge stated, to put items in front of Council that had a realistic chance of getting on the ballot, knowing that it had to clear that hurdle. Ultimately, there were 4 amendments recommended by the Commission. The first one, I'm going to talk about the 3 that were ultimately recommended by Council, and then we'll talk about the last one, which wasn't. The one that now appears on the ballot as issue 10 relates to the Human Resources Department and the Personnel Review Commission. And those are 2 institutions that most citizens probably don't interact with, don't really know a whole lot about. Basically, what happened after the adoption of the original charter was that it created these 2 departments. One is the Department of Human Resources, which is a department under the authority of the county executive. And then it created a Civil Service Commission, which is originally called the Human Resources Commission, was later renamed the Personnel Review Commission. And their job is really to make sure that there's equity and fairness in public employment and public hiring. So they do civil service testing, they do structured interviews, and they actually adjudicate appeals from employees if they've been civil service employees if they've been disciplined or terminated for certain things. So they're both a regulatory as well as kind of adjudicative administrative body. One of the issues that came up in the new form of government was that the original charter was very vague about some of the roles that both of those departments were supposed to play. Some of them were overlapping. One example that actually was a real issue that came up was the concept of promotions. You know, if you're applying to work at the county in a non-bargaining capacity, you have to take a civil service exam, and you have to rank, and then you get interviewed and you get hired. All of that happens through a competitive process. At the same time, the Human Resources Department wanted to do more internal advancement. They wanted to do trainings. They wanted to do things that could help people advance in their career at the county as a way to improve morale, retain employees, do a lot of other good government things. But in that process, they wanted to make some changes that the Personnel Review Commission felt maybe this could have a negative impact on the fairness of the process. And so there were some internal county sort of meetings that took place to try and figure out how to resolve some of these issues. And at the end of the day, both the Personnel Review Commission and the Human Resources Department came to the Charter Review Commission with recommended amendments to the charter. And initially those amendments were not in accord. They were both trying to achieve different things. So at our first meeting, I think, or one of our first meetings, we asked that they go negotiated an agreed upon amendment that they could both live with, which they did. To their credit, I think that they did an excellent job of sitting down and coming up with an amendment that...
And I don't think any blood was shed.
No.
It was,
We thought there was going to be blood on the floor.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So we can get into the details of what all that's entailed in this particular charter amendment in the Q&A if people want to get into that. But basically what this is about was resolving an internal administrative overlap of duties between these two different departments. So the next item that's the issue that's on the list is issue 11. That has to do with the county's internal audit committee. And our internal audit department. The audit committee is actually a new function of county government when the charter was adopted. It basically conducts audits of county departments and issues reports and is independent from both the county executive and county council. There's a committee that is made up of, it's technically 7 members. 5 of them are voting, and only one of them is an official of the county. The rest are citizens of Cuyahoga County who are appointed and confirmed. This was one, as the judge mentioned, that was really mainly a technical change, but I think an important one that was requested by the audit committee, and it does basically 2 things. First, it said that the current charter says that the audit committee is supposed to charge departments at audit. So say the internal auditor wanted to audit the sheriff's department. If they went in there and did an audit, that the charter technically mandated that they basically send them a bill for the cost of the audit. But since we started the new form of government, we found that, I think on Council's side, it's easier to budget by actually just establishing a budget for the auditing department. So rather than having them charge the sheriff's department and Council approving a budget for auditing fees in the sheriff's department, we just funded the internal audit department directly. And so we changed basically a shall bill to a may bill. So there may be certain circumstances where the internal audit department may want to or need to bill a department, particularly if they're doing something that relates to special revenue funds or things like that. But on the whole, most of their activities are going to be funded out of our normal biennial budget. The other change here has to do with the auditing standards they follow. The charter required them to follow 2 sets of nationally set auditing standards, and those 2 standards, while similar, were not identical, and so there was potential that the internal auditor could be put in a catch-22, where they would be complying with one but not the other, or maybe it would be impossible to comply with both at the same time. So basically the second change simply allows them to comply with one or the other. If they can comply with both, great, but it basically gives the audit committee the opportunity to pick one auditing standard and stick with it, but it still has to follow one of those 2. That's basically it for that amendment. The third amendment that's going to show up on the ballot is issue 12, and this is probably the one that got the most attention. Has to do with the county's inspector general, and in 2011, Cuyahoga County actually already has an inspector general. The office was created in 2011 when the new council came into office. I know the League of Women Voters was integral into the drafting of that legislation, along with the county's existing code of ethics. And so that was something that the new council really wanted to put into place. We've had 2 inspector generals so far. I think on the whole, council has agreed that it's been working well. This was actually recommended to be added to the charter. So I guess taking a step back, the biggest issue with the inspector general right now is technically it could be repealed by a simple majority vote of council. And in an institution where you've got an office that is investigating allegations of ethical violations and other types of public behavior, having that type of office be subject to abolishment or amendment, that could actually constrain the activities potentially of an inspector general who is trying to trace down fraud, abuse, waste, things like that. So this was something that has been on the table and in discussion for basically 6 or 7 years now. So really the only way to abolish the office, assuming this is adopted, would be through another charter amendment. The only one other thing I'd note about this one is the addition, there was one addition to this. Currently the Inspector General does not have the power to subpoena. They have the ability to investigate any county office, and for the most part county offices have been pretty good about complying with the Inspector General, so that's less of an issue. But one of the issues that our current Inspector General raised as a bit of a challenge is if there's a county contractor or if there's somebody who's interacted or does business with the county in some way, there's really no mechanism by which our Inspector General can get access to some of their records to determine whether or not any wrongdoing took place. So this amendment gives the Inspector General to subpoena documents, papers, witnesses' testimony, etc., for things that he or she has the authority to investigate. It's still limited in scope, but it's an addition to what currently exists. So those are the 3 amendments that are on the November ballot.
Before we leave that one, the other thing I'd like to say is that there's always been some tension between the Office of Inspector General and the County Prosecutor's Office. And the County Prosecutor's Office, I think, believes from time to time that the responsibilities of the Inspector General kind of intrude on his turf. And so he came in with a pretty significant objection to taking this forward, and he presented it to Counsel about the same time that we presented the report. So Counsel had the opportunity to hear his objections and to give some thought as to whether or not they still wanted to move forward with what we were doing with the Inspector General, especially as it related to subpoena power and as it related to, and we were talking about establishing some kind of a line item budget for the Inspector General to make sure that there was always going to be some funding for that office. So again, the Inspector General's office couldn't be starved by the people that he might be or she might be investigating, and couldn't be fired by the people that he or she might be investigating. So I think that all things being equal, this was an excellent exercise in democracy.
Yes, thanks for that addition. And to that point, I think the role, people may have questions about the role of the Inspector General versus the prosecutor. And like Inspector Generals at both state and federal levels, the Inspector General isn't law enforcement, right? They don't prosecute crimes. They don't actually even discipline employees. What they do is they shine a light onto government activities and sort of they issue reports to call attention to areas where fraud, waste, and abuse may exist. And if in their investigations they uncover criminal activity, they do refer those to the appropriate law enforcement agencies. So our Inspector General has referred certain things to the prosecutor and other law enforcement. So just to clarify that distinction. So the one amendment that was recommended by the Charter Review Commission that Counsel did not place on the ballot has to do with campaign finance. And this was something that we discussed at length in the commission. And it's something where I think conceptually we all agreed on the supporting the concept of campaign finance. The problem is campaign finance is very complicated, particularly with existing Supreme Court case law, Buckley v. Vallejo, Citizens United, and there were some concerns about, even if we were trying to attempt to create a level playing field, given some of the limitations of what we could do, as a county government, that there would still be inequities in the way people finance elections. And so there was a lot of discussion about setting particular contribution limits, other things about hoarding, and other regulatory matters related to how campaign finance works. At the end of the day, I don't think there was really, other than the basic consensus, we couldn't really agree upon any particular limits, any particular model. And so what was ultimately recommended to council was that basically giving council the authority to enact campaign finance regulations if it so chose. And so this would have been an addition to Article 3 of the Charter, which enumerates council's roles and responsibilities and its powers and duties, and would have added explicitly the fact that council could regulate county elections. We did receive an opinion from the county's law department that actually council already has this authority, even though it wasn't explicitly listed in the charter. And I think, as you know, I'll turn it over to Councilwoman Baker in a second here. I think that was part of the calculation in council's decision as to whether or not to place it on the ballot, because why take the time and energy of voters to give council the authority for something it already had the power to do. But I'll turn it over to Councilwoman Baker now and take you through the process.
Yeah, Councilwoman Baker, if you could just discuss how you received the information about the proposed charter changes and how you dealt with them through committee work first and then council.
Sure. And you know, first of all, welcome. And I do represent this district, Westlake, Rocky River, North Olmsted, Fairview Park, and Bay Village. So Westlake Porter Library is a jewel in this district, and it's wonderful that we're here today. So if you're not from Westlake, welcome. All right, well, first of all, I've been on county council for about a year and almost 2 years now. It'll be 2 years at the end of this year. I do chair a committee, and it's called the Council Operations and Intergovernmental Relations and Transportation Committee. I always say that's a mouthful. Everything is acronyms, so this is referred to as choir for the individual beginnings of each word, or we call it the Rules Committee. But I have been given the responsibility to chair that committee, and the charter amendments fall under this responsibility. So that is why I am here. And as many of you probably know, even our local city councils, you see many types of different legislation passed quickly at a council member, when a council member is presented at a council meeting, but the work is done in the committee. And there's no difference here. The lion's share of the work was done by the Charter Review Commission, and as he said, they had 12 different times that they met and reviewed and had many people speak before them regarding all of the different types of issues that were before them. So by the time we got it, we did hold a couple of choir committee meetings and heard some testimony, and Mike certainly came and gave us an overview of progress going on as they went through that process, so that our committee members could know just where we stood and what type of amendments were being presented and what seemed to be rising to the surface and what some of the issues were. So we were, besides the ability to be able to come to the Charter Review Commission and listen for ourselves, which I went to a few, we also then got an overview by Mike, who was, of course, a member of that commission. As was said, the charter review amendments were due by July 1st. So by July 1st, then we began to take more notice and know that it's coming our way. We went from the choir committee to the council of the whole, so that all council members could hear what these charter amendments were about. The deadlines for the amendment to be placed on the ballot needed to be placed by September 17th for the Board of Elections agenda. So we needed to act pretty quickly after July 1st to understand what it is that we were asked to review. The approved amendments need a 7 out of 11 county council members to approve. So it's not just a majority, it's a 7 out of 11. If we wanted to make an amendment, we could. If we wanted to create our own charter amendment, we could. We have the power to do that as Mike suggested earlier regarding the campaign finance. There was a last-minute change. It was in the paper. It was kind of a headline for a short time, and that's when the prosecutor asked that we consider making the Inspector General, whoever it may be, that they have a law degree. And we were taken by surprise because we thought we were ready to go. The amendments were before us. We narrowed it down to 3 or 4. And last minute, here we are looking at the prosecutor, and he wants to make a change. So we took that under consideration, and we did, at the time of passage, and actually we had to create a new resolution, if I'm sure about that. We had to create a new resolution to include that the Inspector General must have a law degree. One note that I didn't hear mentioned is that the Charter Review Commission will not get together for another 10 years. So this was, in the past, I believe, was every 3. But now we are looking at another 10 before the commission will organize again. So that was something to consider, that whatever we ask right now, except by what the county council members can create, and they can create their own charter amendment, it will be another 10 years before the commission or the public has an interest in considering what would go on the ballot. You know, everything that was said, I think that is very well done as far as explaining what each of the 3 were. I hope that we do come back and talk perhaps a little bit more about the succession of what happens when there is a vacancy. We, I think, should spend a little more time on campaign finance and find out if there is an interest by county council members, if we can come to some consensus. I think it is important. The Inspector General, I will note, by all 11 county council members supported that the Inspector General have the ability to subpoena. Yes, thank you. Had the ability to subpoena. Now that's pretty significant that all 11 would think that the Inspector General would have the ability to have subpoena power. I thought, you know, being only my first 2 years on county council, I just thought that, wow, that's saying a lot. So that those are the recommendations, and any questions we could certainly.
Yes, with this prosecutor, did he give any really good or firm or concrete reasons why this Inspector General has to be an attorney?
From recollection, he was very adamant that this position of understanding law, understanding subpoena power, understanding, you know, what it takes, for example, being someone who is investigating any fraud, abuse, as what was mentioned, should have a legal background, and that was his case. Anything else that?
No, I think that he just wanted to make sure that whoever held that position would recognize when they were approaching the line or about to cross the line into areas where they had no business. And that if you had somebody who was a layperson, that they might not be as versed as they should be about where those lines might be, given the fact that you know, when you're talking about looking at fraud, talking about looking at abuse, that there are statutes that deal specifically with those kinds of things, that you probably would be better served to have somebody who has a legal background just to review that as the decisions are being made.
Mr. King, could you explain, someone in the audience has a question about who hires and fires the person who serves as the IG, and is this clear in the charter? And also about how the language itself in the charter was drafted. Did your department do that?
So the language, actually, the language in the charter was probably drafted back in 2013 when this item was first heard before the the original Charter Review Commission, the first one that happened, and sort of had evolved since then. So we used that as a starting point. Councilman Miller and I were probably the two people who had the most direct hand in redrafting the specific language, but there were a number of ideas generally that made it into the final version of what ultimately was recommended by the Charter Review Commission.
And who hires, it's in the language, who
yeah.
hires and fires the IG?
Yeah, so the Inspector General currently serves a set term. I believe right now it's 5 years. I think in the Charter Amendment it's being changed to 4. Yeah, it's 4 years. It's going to be staggered with the county executive. The Inspector General is appointed by the county executive and confirmed by county council. So it's a two-step process like with a lot of the other directors and boards and commission members. What the Charter Amendment provides for removal of the Inspector General, either the Inspector General's term will expire and potentially another Inspector General could be appointed. But in terms of actually removing an Inspector General, it requires a vote of 8 members of council and has to be for cause. Council can discuss removal in what's called executive session, which is not a public meeting, but have to provide at least one public hearing to provide the IG and the public an opportunity to be heard prior to a vote for removal. And this is generally consistent with what's in the ordinance right now, is creating the agency of Inspector General. The Charter Amendment adds the open hearing requirement.
Yes, which the league actually raised that question.
Yep.
Yeah, that was Linda Mayer. Sticking with the IG amendment, someone has asked, how will the IG enforce their rulings? That department, is there an enforcement mechanism, or how does it work if they find something they're not pleased about?
Yeah, so as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the Inspector General doesn't actually have any enforcement powers. He can issue reports, he can make recommendations, and he can refer things to law enforcement. But for the most part, I think the most enforcement authority the IG has currently in the ordinance is the ability to issue a letter of censure or something like that. It's really just, if, say there's wrongdoing found by an employee of the county, that will be referred to our Human Resources Department potentially for discipline. But it's ultimately up to the employer, not the Inspector General, as to what happens. And again, if there is any criminal wrongdoing that's found, the IG will refer it to Prosecutor's Office, FBI, other law enforcement.
If I may add something to that.
Oh yes, and also Councilwoman Baker, if you could explain how did the votes on council go for these 3 amendments?
First of all, for that, I believe that it was unanimous.
For all 3?
All 3, yes. All 3 were unanimous. I would like to see, and it's not, I didn't believe it should be placed in the charter, but after this is passed, which I believe it will pass, it's an important piece of the charter, that we give the IG this subpoena power and other parts of what we think his job should entail. I do believe also that his recommendations, from what I've seen since I've been there, they should be answered. And I think we can do that legislatively. They should be answered. He'll give recommendations for this department to ensure perhaps better process, or perhaps our economic development, which we've had some issues internally. This is what I recommend could be done that would improve transparency and efficiency. And I do believe that we should expect an answer back from those directors, and we don't always get those answers back. So they don't have to agree. They can disagree. They may have different ideas about how to make it better than the Inspector General has, but I don't think that it should be silence. I do believe that we have him there for a purpose. He goes through an awful lot of trouble to bring to us what he feels different recommendations should be. And I will be asking, and Councilman Miller is also in agreement. Hopefully we will both be working on this together, that there should be an answer for the recommendations that the Inspector General gives to us to answer that question that you were asking. What happens after the recommendations are given?
Okay, thank you. Since we're on the Inspector General amendment, does anyone have a question, another question in particular about that amendment? No? Go ahead, Michael.
How is the Inspector General funded, and does the Inspector General have a staff?
Yes, the Inspector General does have a staff. The IG's office is funded through the county's budget process. It's mostly general fund. Some of the Inspector General's activities are funded by every county contractor and every lobbyist with the county has to register, and they have to pay a nominal, I mean, it's like $100 or something that lasts for 4 years. And so the IG does have a couple special revenue funds, but they're pretty small compared to their overall budget. So.
Anybody else on that one? I have a few general questions, but let's go to specifics on the other two first. Okay. Anyone have a question about the internal auditing amendment? No. Well, yeah, it's really very clear. What was kind of funny about it, Judge Adrine, was how they came in at the last minute with this. Yeah. But I guess they're mulling it over, and they hadn't realized what was going on. I don't know, but it was a pretty.
I think they were suffering from the same kind of issue that we were as to whether or not it was appropriate for them to address it, because it was so technical.
Yeah.
But I think that they ultimately resolved it the same way that we did. It's in the charter, and so if it's provided for in the charter, then it ought to be clarified in the charter as to what their requirements and their obligations were.
Yes, thank you. Now we can move over to the chart, the number 10 on your ballot, the issue 10, and that's about the Personnel Review Commission and Department of Human Resources. I do have a few questions, general questions I can put to the panel, but if you have any specific questions about that particular amendment? No. Let me just offer you questions, general questions. I don't even know, Michael, if you go back this far, but when we drafted our county charter, we did consider that there's a question about, did we learn anything from Summit County as we looked at, well, I don't know about drafting the original charter, if any of you know about that. The league was very closely involved in that. But did we learn anything from the Summit County, any amendments they've made over the years in looking at what we were doing, or did we not do that?
Yeah, that might be a little bit before my time. I will say, I know the Summit County Charter included a similar type of civil service commission. I don't know how that's operated for them and whether or not that's had an issue. I don't know if either of you.
Judge Adrine, did you look, or?
The only thing I will say is, for those that don't know, is Summit County is the only other county that has government as we do. I don't know how many people do that. So we mirrored ourselves to their county, wanting to change from the 3 commissioners to an executive and 11 county council members. So that, just as a comparison, that is the only other county that has government set up the way we are.
And specifically to speak to your question, no, we didn't really look at Summit County, and I think that at least has something to do with the fact that we were so relieved that they were able to work this out on their own, because we were, all of the scuttlebutt that we heard from October until maybe the middle of January was that they had been having beef with one another over various and sundry turf issues, and that they each had their own idea as to how this was going to go and how it should go, and that it was going to be a contentious kind of situation.
You may not even be aware of the fact that some people on the Personnel Review Commission called the league and asked us to come over to their office and learn about what their disagreements were, and could the league help push any of this. And Linda Mayer went with me, and we said, the league is so focused on, we can't take positions on anything we haven't studied.
Right.
So we said, no, we can't help at all, but we really hope you work this out.
That's what we told them to.
Yeah,
really
work this out.
Why do you be a referee?
Yeah. Now, here's an interesting question. Do you anticipate that any of the measures on the ballot will be contested legally if they pass? Can you imagine a circumstance like that? Well, you never know. People.
No, you never do know. I thought that the 3 that were adopted were fairly straightforward. I thought that the way that we got to where we got gave everybody who really had strong feelings about any of these things to come to one of those 12 hearings and make it known. We tried to do our best to make sure that we got the word out to all corners of the county, so that if there was somebody who had not heard at the point of the first one, that by the time we got to the last one, they would have had an opportunity to see and hear what we were proposing to do. And you know, much to my, I guess I'm going to say to my surprise, you know, there weren't a lot of strong opinions brought forward, even amongst the things that we decided that we weren't going to look at this time around. I think there were a couple of folks that had some strong opinions of it, but even when we decided we weren't going to go in that direction, they accepted it. And I like to think that that's a function of us engaging in a level of procedural fairness and justice that made people feel comfortable.
Well, I think it was also your leadership, Judge Adrine. I mean, he ran this commission just so beautifully and fairly and openly. I was so impressed.
Oh, thank you.
I'm glad I got to meet you, really. It was
Thank you.
So wonderful. Okay, now this is a more general question about the charter. When you look at our county charter, is there any single problem you would like to see changed if you had your druthers, if you could just wave a magic wand? Is there anything in particular that bothers you? No.
No, I think, you know, some of the not on the charter are things that perhaps we should be looking at, whether it belongs on a charter or perhaps could be done legislatively. You know, the succession, I think, is concerning. You know, what happens if there is a vacancy. Campaign finance, as sticky as it is, and there are some examples. We have the state that has their rules of how they govern campaign finance, and you know, but I don't think there's anything that's wrong with the charter. I think that we have a well-run county government. I'm glad to see that we do have an inspector general. You know, we may be reading some things in the paper that make us uncomfortable, but it's because we have an inspector general that is there and watching and reporting that makes the transparency of what it is that we read and learn and know about. So that is all good. I don't think that that we want to change any of that. So I think the charter as it stands is a good, strong charter. I think I like the 11-member county council member structure. Each one of us has 120,000 approximately people that we represent from the place where we live. Before it was 3 county commissioners, and you know, I'm not sure how much they thought about Westlake or Rocky River or Fairview Park, where each of us now have a district that we represent that we live in or we live near. And if you had a concern, you can call us or contact us and feel easier about asking that question or approaching us because we are part of the district that you live in. So I think that is a good structure, and I'm really glad to be there and be part of seeing this county government and how it operates. I'm pleased with how the charters have evolved and how the charter reads and all these amendments that will be put on the ballot.
Thank you. Mr. King, I have a question about what is going on right now with the prosecutor's office and the IT department issues. If we had had the charter already including the IG with subpoena power, would it have progressed the same way as it has? Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, so before I answer that question,
Yeah,
I want to give a quick shout out to Janae Holly in the back here. She's staff at the Charter Review Commission. I just saw her after we gave her opening remarks, so she was integral to everything we did. In terms of what's been happening in terms of the investigation going on, you know, there's only so much we know at this point. But what I can say is that I think it's clear that without the Inspector General and the county internal auditor, that a number of the issues that have come to light would not have come to light. The county executive in the State of the County speech earlier this year basically acknowledged as much, that really the reason we know about these things is because the institutions are working the way they were designed to work. And so I think that with that as the backdrop, I think that's why Counsel felt, you know, now's really the time to enshrine the Office of the Inspector General in the county charter because it has been working the way it's supposed to work. And
So whether or not he or she had subpoena power would not have really made a difference in this particular case?
yeah, I mean, it sounds like some of the issues have to deal with contractors, and I think that, that's an issue where the Inspector General said to us, my authority to investigate is clear among county employees, but if I want to go to a contractor and say, hey, I want to see what your records show to determine whether or not something untoward has happened, they can tell him to go pound salt, and there's nothing you can do about it. So
Go pound salt. So I just want to make sure I understand that it wouldn't have, the Inspector General would have been able to subpoena those records on his own, right?
had this charter
been
amendment
here,
been in
okay,
effect,
yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah, so I mean, from my perspective, what that probably means is that we would have gotten this information quicker.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that it wouldn't have ever surfaced, because obviously it did even without subpoena power, but I think that with subpoena power, the nature and the scope of the issue would have come to the fore more rapidly.
Yeah, now I've heard a few questions about, now that we have the internal auditor, we do already have an Inspector General who will have a little more power. Is that just too many people looking under rocks all over the county, or do they are their efforts at cross purposes sometimes, or do they, explain that.
I think that when you're talking about public integrity, that as long as you have a clear line of demarcation as to what the roles and responsibilities of the various actors are, and you have to have that so that you don't have people stepping on each other's toes, that it's hard for me to imagine that you have too many people. I always tell people, I'm from the Department of Redundancy Department. I think the more is better in this particular instance, and if for no other reason than when you know that there are a lot of people looking, I think that you're less likely to do something that you shouldn't do, and just as long as it doesn't get to be, a bureaucratic morass.
Yeah.
They say, okay, who's going to take lead on this, and how's that going to work? I think fundamentally they do play different roles. The auditor is meant to look into particular areas from a systematic viewpoint. They go in and they say, okay, what are the controls that are in place? What are the procedures that are being followed? Are they being followed in practice? And then, issues reports based on sort of those structural things. The Inspector General primarily investigates allegations based on whistleblowers and other types of tips he'll get. And he also does advisory opinions and other things as it relates to conflict of interest. So, if somebody has a conflict of interest and is uncertain whether or not they should participate or get involved in a particular activity, they can go to the Inspector General and say, hey, can you give me some guidance on this? And he does a really good job, I think, of providing that advice. So.
I agree with all that. And I had a meeting with the Inspector General not long ago because he's required to give us an update quarterly on, is it quarterly or semi-annual? Semi-annual. It's only been there 2 years, so it's semi-annual. And asked that question, do you ever have a time where you are talking about the same or inspecting the same as our internal auditor? Because it seems like the internal auditor's report had some things that I remember we used to talk about that you were looking into. And he said just that. They work together, they don't step on each other. If one is taking the lead, then the other one backs off. And they have a great relationship. I too think you can't have enough eyes. This is a big county. There's a lot of money that we are responsible for. And I think having more people looking at what it is that is being done is a good thing for you as the taxpayers who rely on us to make sure that we spend your money wisely and we do the work correctly. So I agree with it.
Thank you. Anyone? Here, go ahead.
Would it matter what discipline the IG has in his lawyer abilities? Could he be a patent attorney or a trial attorney? Is there a difference?
So I believe the requirements, I don't have them in front of me, but I believe the requirements simply require the Inspector General to hold a Juris Doctor, but he or she also has to have at least 5 years experience in some type of either investigative, accounting, comptroller type of work for a public or private entity. So there is an experiential requirement, and then there's the degree requirement.
Michael?
We're less than 10 years into the current form of county government. And just as a casual observer, it appears that a lot of the races, candidates are running unopposed, or they're running in an environment where their opposition isn't very strong. Is there anything that the charter has in it that makes it difficult for people to run for office? Or conversely, is there anything we could put in the charter that would entice more people to run?
Well, you're talking to someone who has been in office for over 20 years.
Why don't you give us that background?
Okay. And it's all, for the most part, grassroots. Started out on Westlake School Board and ran for that office and won and stayed for the full term of 4 years. And then there was a somewhat of an open seat. It wasn't appointed to someone that was there for a couple of months, and I thought there was an opportunity to run for that seat, so I did. And I was on City Council then for 9 years. And then there was an opportunity for an open seat. Not really an open seat. I did challenge that seat. It was a seat that I thought I could win at the Ohio House of Representatives in Columbus, and did win that seat. So left the local government and went on to the State House and was there every other year. I had a campaign. We talked about campaigns. So I was challenged. So term limits there were 8 years. So I had 4 campaigns for an 8-year stay. So now I am here on County Council that I was appointed to by someone who has left and has gone on to a different seat. And I am on the ballot this year for the first time in all those years of always earning the opportunity and privilege to be serving. I am not challenged. So it surprised me that here I am in a environment where I was ready to go again, yard signs, campaign, fundraisers, all the things that you do, and I'm not. And my other colleagues were challenged in the primary. So we do have primary challenges. So it's not like there aren't any campaigns at all. There were several that were in campaign, I think it was in May of this year. So, but no, there are no one that are challenged, and it's staggered too. So it's not like all 11 are not. It's staggered. So only 4 or 5 are even on the ballot this time. The ballots will be in 2 years, that the others may or may not be challenged. So there is some contest. I'm always used to a campaign, so I'm surprised that I didn't have one this time. And you know, anyone can run. There's nothing that I could see would make it difficult for anyone to pull a petition. 50 signatures is all you need. 50 qualified signatures is all you need to put yourself on the ballot. So it's not like you need hundreds or thousands of signatures. It's very easy. You have plenty of time to do it. So I don't know why there aren't more, but there are challenges. Like I said, there are challenges in the primary. There have been challenges in the past. It's just in this particular time, those that are staggered, that are on the ballot, like myself, do not have a challenger.
So Judge Adrine, this actually did come up at the Charter Review Commission, some discussion about making all of county offices nonpartisan. That was one of them. And the other one was a primary with all the candidates for a particular job on council, as opposed to party primaries.
Yeah.
Do you want to just talk about why there were two, they were similar ideas. Would that make a difference, do you think?
I'm not really sure.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure either.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not really sure, because I think that this is kind of it's almost more of a cultural phenomenon than it is a political phenomenon, because Cuyahoga County, for whatever reason, is structured in such a way so that most of the districts are one party
Or the other.
or the other. And
Even on the Charter Review Commission, it had to be split.
it had to be split, which is,
Yeah,
that's
well,
fine.
right.
I think that I think the competitive elections are the thing that would get us out of this tribal place that we are now. Because the way things are situated now, when you only have to be answerable to one group of folks, that doesn't tend to broaden your mental horizon.
Well, fortunately, don't you think, Councilwoman Baker, that we operate in a much more civil way than some other parts of our government do?
Yeah, I mean, I will comment on that. I agree. I mean, it's been really a pleasure to be on County Council. Everyone there, and I'll say this, sincerely, they all care. They care about this county. Many of them, most of them were there from the beginning. They're all charter members. So they do have a sincere desire to make sure. And I think that's why all 11 supported the IG and having subpoena power. Now that is telling the executive that we want to make sure that we have open transparency and that things are looked at under every rock if it has to be, that we are not going to be drawn into any controversies that we can't explain. And we are protected by that the best to our ability by having an internal auditor and by having an inspector general. And I think that that anyone who comes to the county council meetings, especially if you come to committee meetings is where all the work is done. The Health and Human Services, the Public Works, the Safety committees, all of those, Finance Committee, at least an hour or more we spend twice a month talking on whatever issues are brought before us. And if we need to, we carry it over for another time to discuss. It is I think county council is being as accountable as it possibly can, and they need to get along in order to do that. Doesn't mean we all agree. I mean, there certainly are votes that we are different on. But as far as working together and trying to do the best we can for the county as we see it, I do believe you have a good county council representing Cuyahoga County.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience?
Yes.
Go ahead.
If I'm correct, there are 88 counties in the state of Ohio.
That's
Why
correct.
only 2 counties are being with county government? Why not the others?
I can't speak to exactly what motivated Summit County. I don't know.
Especially Franklin, the county for Cincinnati.
Well, you know why
Yeah.
the FBI got involved in Cuyahoga County, and the League County and residents and voters thought that, hey, we've got to clean this up. And we thought this was the best way to do it. Now, as for other counties, Mr. King, you got any insight
I
on
would
this?
just say, so the authority for the county to adopt its own charter is vested in the Ohio Constitution. There's a very high bar in order to get a county charter on the ballot. I think you need petitions signed by 10% of the people who voted in the last gubernatorial election in the county. We're talking in Cuyahoga County, potentially hundreds of thousands of people. And so I think in order to actually get the political momentum,
right.
political will to put something on the ballot like that and disrupt all of the existing political institutions, the three commissioners and the various other elected offices, you need some type of civic movement to make that happen. And I don't know why Summit did either, but they adopted their charter back in the 70s. We did it here in Cuyahoga County following a pretty widespread scandal. And so I have heard of a couple other counties in northern Ohio have considered it since the adoption of our county charter, but so far there just hasn't been that type of push.
Yeah, well, I know the League was one of the groups involved in collecting those hundreds of thousands of signatures. And I don't know if you remember on our homepage, we showed a picture of a bunch of women and men with boxes of petitions. We were motivated for good reason. I have one other IG question. We've seen the IGs in various federal departments working, and they sometimes start investigating things that, you wonder why they did. Is there always a whistleblower involved, or does the IG sometimes go around looking for work?
Our charter amendment gives the IG the authority to investigate without a whistleblower complaint. I think when we get our semi-annual reports, the vast majority of the IG's work is done through whistleblowers. The IG can also begin doing investigations on his or her own, but that's probably in rare cases, and maybe just, I mean, our IG actually tries to keep abreast of what various boards and commissions and departments are doing. So he'll go to meetings where contracts are being considered or approved, and so there are times he's just sort of there in the room keeping an eye on things, and so I think that kind of keeps everybody honest a little bit. So that, again, none of that has to do with whistleblower complaints, but it's not even really a formal investigation, but he stays on top of it. We have a board of control that approves contracts below a certain threshold, the ones that don't go to council. Councilman Baker actually sits on the board of control. And so we try to have an open process for all of these things, and our Inspector General stays up to date on most of that. So.
Okay, thank you.
He's very proactive too, where you can call and say, is it unethical for me to donate to this person, or is it unethical for me to work on something during county time? Of course, the answer is yes, yes, and yes. But he does have him. So we perhaps can not have as much investigation because people feel that there's an open door that they could contact him and ask, can I do this? Or even our directors, this contract or that contract, give me some guidelines. And he will then give them what answers that they're looking for. So that, I think, curtails perhaps some of the problems we could have if they didn't feel that they had someone to go to ask whether or not this is allowed or legal or ethical.
Thanks. Anyone else from the audience with questions? Boy, we really appreciate this so much. Did someone else? Did you see another question?
Was not back there.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just thought of something as you were talking. So all the work happens in the committees. Is there a place where you can see what the agenda of the committee, of the upcoming committee meeting is?
Yes, so the council has a website. It's council.cuyahogacounty.us. It's also from the main county webpage. You can find it. The council rules require that we post the agendas for all of the committees online at least 2 full business days before the actual meetings themselves. So our committees are Monday through Wednesday. So most of the committees that happen on Monday and Tuesday are posted the week prior, and then the Wednesday committees are usually posted by Monday, sometimes earlier than that. And same goes for the council, regular council meetings, which are Tuesday night, two times a month, Tuesday nights at 5 p.m. And those are usually posted the Friday prior. So there's usually 3 or 4 days at least between when the meeting starts and when the agenda is posted.
In addition to that, everything is streamed. So if you miss the meeting and you want something to do on a Friday night, you can go to the website and you can pick whatever committee or council meeting that you'd like to review, and you can watch it firsthand.
Oh, so it's not just streamed while it's going on, the video is saved so you can access it later?
Yes, it is.
YouTube.
YouTube, yes. So it is as transparent as you could possibly want as far as knowing what it is that we're doing when we're in public.
Thank you. Go ahead, boy, look at that, more questions.
Where can we find a full copy of the language for the amendments?
Yes, that is a really good question.
So this is, the resolutions, I've got them up here. The resolutions that council approved are on the council's website. They're a little, you kind of have to dig for them a little bit. It's under legislation resolutions. One thing maybe we can do next week when we're back in the office is I'll post them. I can post them on our website under the featured items page so you can find them. But they're under the, you can find them under the resolutions tabs. One of them, well, never mind. But they're up there, and all of them have both the ballot language and the actual text of the charter amendments, crossed out and underlined for new language. So
That'd be great if you moved them up though,
Yeah.
so we can find them more easily than searching.
yeah,
That'd be great.
yeah, we'll do that.
Okay, thanks again, and this will be online also.